What is going on, YouTube? I want to come back with some of my post-game reactions to Texas's 38-20 win over West Virginia tonight. The second week where I'm doing the kind of post-game reactions for the Longhorns show. We always do the kind of early to midweek show with me, Tark, and Shane, some combination of us. But yeah, like I said, second week in a row with post-game reactions. So this was a really complete effort from Texas tonight. Looked very different than they did last weekend against Texas Tech. Revitalized defense at home. Passing game, like statistically, didn't look a whole lot different just in terms of like yards from last week. But if you just were watching the game, was just completely different in the way they commanded the tone. Rhythmically, the way that the offense looked under Hudson Card, I think without a doubt the best game of his career so far. And then obviously the return of Xavier Worthy, at least for the full game. He was tremendous. Jatavian Sanders saw him utilized the most since like at least week one. I mean, I would also say his best game of the season because he was great for this offense. Offensive line played much better as well. Run game, the way that was utilized, and just the way that the offense looked in the second half, much better than last week. Got to get, like I said just a few moments ago, got to give props to the defense as well. The defense played very well, very disciplined. Didn't really give up much of any big plays. There were times when the corners were getting a little physical. West Virginia seemed to try to pick on Jameer Johnson a lot, but I'll get into some of that a little bit later. But overall, yeah, I mean, the defense looked a lot better. The pressure was a lot more effective against JT Daniels than it was against Donovan Smith. And, you know, lane assignments, lane integrity, just the way that the defense played against the run in this game they weren't bad against the run against Texas Tech. They were pretty good, but just the way they commanded the trenches in this game was a lot more effective. And I think the secondary for the last 2 weeks has held up very, very well. I think the safety and the linebacker play was a differentiator here as well. And just the way that Pete Kwiatkowski and the defensive staff called the game. So let me get into some of the finer points of this game. I'll start on offense. I kind of mentioned in a scattered form of what I thought from the offense and how that kind of came together. And in our video next week, we'll kind of give some more complete thoughts on the way that we felt about this game and kind of how that will translate to when we're talking about Red River and kind of how the Texas offense is looking, against OU. But I think first and foremost, Hudson Card was tremendous in this game. He continues to get better. Man, the way he's able to climb the pocket, keeping the eyes downfield, going through his reads, and really just having a comfort level in the pocket that we didn't see out of him at all last season, maybe outside the Louisiana game. Before he got hurt against West Virginia last season, there were plays that we saw him, like the progressions those strides were finally starting to show up. But the way he looked in this game was, again, there were times last weekend against Texas Tech when he did look really good, but that was mostly in the first half, and the offense just kind of just went into a shell in the second half, and we all know how that went. But he looked very good, and this offense could have a really, really clean transition where Xavier Worthy is healthy. Bijan Robinson looks healthier. Roschon Johnson, when he was called in, looked really good. Keelan Robinson's getting more involved. Man, there's so much to get excited about with the offense heading into OU. And, hopefully that like a lot of the shoulder pain or whatever that Quinn Ewers is feeling in practice this week, he's slated for, focused for a return is a better way to put that next weekend against against OU. So we'll see. But, Xavier Worthy, complete difference maker for this offense, man. We saw what happened against Texas Tech last weekend when Worthy was out of the game. He really didn't take any snaps in the second half, came with a lower body injury. We talked about, again, this Hook'em Headline-centered show, and so talked about on Hook'em Headlines how Worthy was improving throughout the week in practice, and that he was starting to get more of the explosiveness back, and mainly just wasn't having any like hobbling injuries or anything like that was impacting the way he was running routes, and that was quite clear in this game. He was great. In the first quarter, it was like a 33-yard touchdown pass to Jatavian Sanders, who we're going to kind of get into next, but Worthy was great. Yeah, I mean, that was a tremendous throw. A double pass from Hudson Card to Worthy, then to Sanders, who was just pretty much wide open down the left side of the field for a touchdown. Worthy open for a few other long plays in this game. He finished, I believe, 7 catches, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Definitely his best game of the season. Doubled his, or well, I guess technically tripled his previous touchdown total now with 3 on the season. And I need to check and make sure I'm not wrong here, but I believe this was his first game over 100 receiving yards. And just in general, Card was hitting him on those deep balls, was able to step up in the pocket. There was one really, really nice throw where I want to say the Card dodged 2 or 3 at least pass rushers and found Worthy down the field. And the ability to do that with Worthy taking the top off the defense with how many other athletes Texas has in this offense, it completely changes the dynamic of the game. And that was on full display. I said it throughout the week that West Virginia's secondary could be exploited, and that the way that Texas matched up with JT Sanders, with Jordan Whittington, with Xavier Worthy, not to mention any of the other weapons that Texas can utilize in the passing game, ground game for that matter, they took full advantage of that, and that was great to see, and that's what you need to see before facing OU next weekend. I think I've said enough about Worthy just because, I think he is my personal MVP of the game just because, the value that he brings to the table is insane. Was this his best game that we've seen out of him in the last 2 seasons? No, it probably was not. And his best this season is yet to come. But the impact that he can have when he has this type of game was on display for the first time in a full game this season. And it was great to see. My next point here on offense is JT Sanders. Man, he is... I don't know why he wasn't involved as much in the last 2 weeks. I've talked about it a lot on the site where he's a last 3 games. Yeah, I mean, he's a matchup issue, and there were times the last two games, or at least the previous 2 games, where you can see where Sanders still has room to improve in terms of his route running ability and his blocking assignments. He's a sophomore that did not really start at all last season. The blocking assignments, the blocking schemes, particulars or specific instances of maybe mishaps route running, you can work those out just because of the type of player that he is that can make 1 or 2 guys miss at a minimum when you get the ball in his hands. The fact that you have a tight end like that you can get you saw a lot of that in this game. You can get him deep. You can get him in the flats. You can get him behind the line of scrimmage. And he's going to do damage to opposing teams' defenses. It doesn't really matter who you're playing. This West Virginia defensive front is pretty good, and the secondary is experienced and physical around the line of scrimmage, and that just didn't matter against JT Sanders. He's a different tight end, and he needs to continue to be involved in this offense. I will say that. Moving forward, he needs to continue to be involved in this offense. One of the things that flies under the radar with him is how good his hands are. He just doesn't drop passes. If you want to go back to his high school film with Denton Ryan, check that out. That's just the way he is. And so, continue to keep him involved. That was great to see. I believe 79 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. One of those was the pass from Worthy that we were talking about earlier. He was tremendous. The last thing I will say about the offense is, because I don't want to gloss over the way that the ground game was timely and it was effective, and the blocking was pretty good in this game. West Virginia's defensive front is no joke. West Virginia's defensive front might be better than Tex, and Texas's offensive line struggled last week against Tech's defensive front, especially in the second half. both in pass pro and run blocking. And so, the impact that Sark mixing up the offense and having a better second half game plan had really benefited the offensive line and the ground game. But Bijan Robinson goes over 100 yards. Again, Roschon Johnson is situationally really good. Hudson Card has a few big scrambles. And, yes, that's all about timing with the offense, but, you mix a good game plan in with all this talent, the offense being in rhythm with the offensive line, holding up and playing their role at least, and, not having that many blown assignments or just getting clean beat off the line of scrimmage, and it comes up with this cohesive unit. One of the interesting things to me in this game was that I'll take a look here, but I do believe that Texas lost the possession the time of possession battle in this game. Let me see if I can find it here. But yeah, I know that they they ran 18 fewer plays than West Virginia. And, it wasn't near as drastic as it was against Texas Tech. West Virginia had 32 minutes, 10 seconds of possession compared to 27 minutes, 50 seconds for Texas. But, you saw that in this game where, West Virginia wasn't going on fourth down as much. But, man, yeah, having that good game plan and just executing these different areas a lot more, especially on offense, makes a big difference. And you can kind of see where it's Sark might not be prioritizing winning the possession battle near as much as other coaches in the Big 12, and we will probably see that continue to play a role for Texas moving forward this season in various ways. But if this offense can execute the way it did today, or even better moving forward, it doesn't matter. Teams are going to be playing catch-up, and if you want to win the time of possession battle, great, but that just means that you're taking extra seconds off the clock, or extra seconds, minutes, precious time off the clock for time you need to be getting in the end zone to make up scoring margin discrepancies. So there are a lot of positives about the offense in this game. They only score 4 more points than they did last weekend. Total yardage wise, I don't know but execution, timing, and game plan. Those 3 things just made the world's difference in this one. Turn the attention to the defensive side of the ball here, and the defense was a lot better, and you can tell that there was a different comfort level. There was just a different vibe from the defense than there was last weekend in Lubbock. The defense was getting a lot more effective pressure on the quarterback, and I think that had a lot to do with Donovan Smith being that dual threat guy that can pick up those extra 3, 4, 5 yards if he's able to scramble and find some lanes that are open. Whereas you're just not getting that from JT Daniels. You're not getting the level of aggressiveness from JT Daniels and Neil Brown as you are from Joey McGuire and Donovan Smith. I say Neil Brown and JT Daniels. I honestly was expecting a little bit more aggressiveness than we saw out of JT Daniels and out of Graham Harrell. But Texas did what they needed to do to come up with stops on third and fourth down. And again, that was a development that is fantastic to see before facing OU next weekend. I kind of say that, and they got the timely stops that were needed. Looking at the numbers, West Virginia comes up 3 of 5 on fourth down, 9 of 18 on third down, but Texas was getting more. I actually posted some stats before where West Virginia was about 7% less effective on the plus side than the negative side of the 50 on third down so far this season, which is an interesting trend, and I think Texas took pretty good advantage of that, where I'll kind of crunch the numbers, and we'll talk about this more in a few days, but Texas was pretty good on, when they were in their own territory on defense. That bend but don't break defense with Coach K, they played that mantra a lot better. Some specific players that I liked. Deshaun Jamison, man, he's just ultra reliable in pass coverage this season. Ryan Watts has had an underrated run. again, Jameer Johnson, I mentioned him earlier, is getting picked on a little bit more. Not a little bit more. He's getting picked on more so, obviously, than Watson. Jamison, I mean, I get it. He's not as experienced. He's not one of the 2 starting corners. I believe there's, one PI flag on him tonight. But, I mean, overall, I think you're seeing some positives out of Jameer. Again, he got some snaps last season, but this guy is still a second-year sophomore. He's going to get better. He's playing physical. He's showing progressions. So, in that regard, you got to be happy about the strides you're seeing out of him. I mean, the 2 other players I wanted to specifically mention, I guess actually 3. DeMarvion Overshown is the first one. Man, having him for a full game obviously makes a huge difference. He is just a different type of player for this defensive front. You can spin him around to the edge. I really like the way that PK, he's showing a lot of Gary Patterson, just the defensive staff, whoever's involved there, is getting DeMarvion in a multitude of different pressure packages. A few delayed blitzes, some edge blitzes where they were utilizing him from the outside. And it's just a lot more effective pressures. Multiple quarterback pressures from him. Finished up with 8 combined tackles. I would imagine the ballpark of 3 to 4 quarterback pressures from what I saw in this game. 1 quarterback hit, no sacks, but 1 TFL where he just shot through like the C or the D gap. I don't know. It was an outside run. There was a lane that he had, and he just didn't look back and got the ball carrier in the backfield. That was exactly what you would hope for out of a player of DeMarvion Overshown's profile. Second on the team, I believe, in tackles. That 1 TFL, multiple quarterback pressures. He was good. Not great, but good in pass coverage. Doing everything that you would want out of DeMarvion. I mean, obviously, you'd like him to get home a little bit more than he was with, from what I count, in the ballpark of 10 or a dozen pass rush plays, or at least plays where he was utilized as a pass rusher. He was great. If he can make that type of impact moving forward, this defense will continue to be much improved compared to last season. Moro Jomo, interesting situation to look at from this game. Moro, I believe, came up with 1 or 2 tackles and 1 sack. He had the first sack, I believe, of this game. But man, watching the film that I have, the difference between Moro Jomo being on the field, and then because he was missing last weekend, I think he was him missing last weekend. I've mentioned it a lot in passing. I think he had a bigger impact than most people realize. The way that he's able to command those gap assignments, that he's able to take up space in the trenches, he just does everything right, man. He doesn't miss tackles. He does exactly what PK wants out of him in this like kind of 3-3-5 or 2-4-5 hybrid defensive scheme, and he was very good in this game. It all season long. It hasn't really showed up on this like the box score stats as much as it would if you watch the film and you kind of see the difference between when he's on and off the field. And then if you look at like his PFF defensive grades, I'm sure that this is going to be another positive week for him. Maybe there was 1 missed tackle that I didn't see and it ruins that. But if I'm grading him, or if anyone who's objectively watching this game is grading him, he had a solid game. And I want to build off that with Jalen Ford. Jalen Ford had another one of those games where he just found the football. 14 tackles, led the team in tackles again. That was not a season high for him because I believe he had 15 in the win over UTSA. I have to say I really like the way that Jalen Ford is responding when he has an off game this season. Jalen Ford was one of the worst, not the worst, I don't like to put it that way. He definitely did not have his best game against UL Monroe, which he came out so strong against Alabama and UTSA that it just didn't really matter that much. But you gotta like the way, like he, obviously he was still like getting, like still trying to find his stride, trying to get in his rhythm in the first, in the opener, and then he really found his way the second and third game, and then getting into Big 12 play. I believe he did lead the team in missed tackles against Texas Tech. I believe had the worst defensive grade. If it wasn't the worst, it was second worst among the defensive starters. Comes back this weekend, and again, leads team in tackles, 1 or 2 tackles for loss. Extremely disruptive. From what I saw, maybe 1 or 2 missed tackles compared to 14. When he's finding the football the way he did, man, great game for Jalen Ford. And when you have guys like, I mean, you got to give props to Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat, all those dudes in the trenches, man, they are moving bodies around down there. At least compared to what we saw in the last game and throughout a lot of last season. T'Vondre Sweat is definitely one of the best, most improved players in the defensive front so far this season. We've seen a lot of flashes from him. Man has those NFL tools, but he's starting to put a lot of that together this season, and it's really contributing a lot to the defensive front. But I guess give some shouts to special teams. Let me kind of check some of the numbers here, but Bert Auburn, I think, had 1 or 2, like 40 plus. I think it was 1 45 plus yard field goal. Yeah, 1 of 1. I'm sorry about that. Yes, 1 of 1. And it was a 45-yard try. That was the last score for Texas in this game. I think I'm a little bit tired now. But, special teams, no notable mistakes, really. And, I mean, a lot of this goes back to the offensive execution where you just didn't have a huge onus on special teams in this game, maybe like you would have had against, like, an Alabama or Texas Tech or something like that. But you like to see Bert Auburn, man, when the hold's been there, he's been money. And in clutch situations, 40-plus yarder against. He's had a 40-plus yarder, I think, I'd have to check UTSA, but he might have had a 40-plus yarder. It's either in 4 straight weeks or 3 of the last 4. So, I mean, you got to considering some of the uncertainty that was there around the kicking game coming into the season between Bert and Will Stone, the freshman, you have to like the way that is trending. Let me check the UTSA. Anyway, regardless, again, you have to like the way that things are moving in that regard. Yeah, you did have 1, so that's 4 straight weeks now. Kicking game coming along well. Anyway, complete team effort here, which, you have to like this in some degree where it's it's the complete team responding, where there wasn't blame to any one party last weekend, that it could go all around. The defense, man, you're on the field for 100 plays, you can't get off the field on 4th down. Obviously blame to be put on the defense last weekend in a loss to Tech. Last weekend, too, the offense kind of went into a shell in the second half. Hudson Card wasn't great. Running game wasn't getting much movement yet. Bijan Robinson with a fumble on the first play of overtime. Sark himself that just lost, it seemed, all creativity, really, in the second half on offense last week. And they just protected the lead so much better on offense this weekend. They just really got it done much better in that regard. In the second half, I mean, yes, there are things you could pick apart in that regard. Things you would like to see still better on the interior of the offensive line and with the run game and things like that. But, hopefully we continue to see progressions in the coming weeks. And I'd still say that this was mostly a weekend of positives, but still things that we will know and point out here before we get into OU next weekend. Anyway, like I said, a lot of positives to talk about, which is nice. There's a lot of negatives to talk about coming out of Tech, especially in the immediate aftermath. But, that's pretty much it. See ya.